Welcome back to PPCM's Painful Truth. Today's guest, Adrienne Mongeon.
Adrienne, thank you for your time today,
No
throughout the
problem.
day,
My pleasure.
and explaining exactly what happened to you. And with that, when were you diagnosed with peripartum cardiomyopathy?
So I wrote down my timeline here. I was admitted to the hospital and diagnosed on December 15th of 2020. So that is 3 days shy of my newborn at the time being 2 months old.
Okay. So so you were diagnosed after you had delivery.
Yes, I didn't
After
even have symptoms
complications.
until a week or so after delivery.
Okay. And how were all your results during your pregnancy of that maybe didn't show any type of sign that you were peripartum cardiomyopathy?
Everything was fine. My weight was, within normal ranges, except for the very end. I kind of ballooned up a little bit, but she said, as long as it was fine because you're about to deliver anyway, just don't gain any more. The gestational diabetes test was fine. All the ultrasounds were fine. Blood work
So
was
she didn't put
fine.
it two and two together that gaining weight didn't have anything to do with actual fluid. She thought you were physically gaining weight.
Mm-hmm. I
That's
think because I kind of gained it all over,
yes.
or she just didn't notice. I don't know.
Yes, that's that's what happened to me during my pregnancy. It was all over.
Mm-hmm.
And the only treatment I had was a nutritionist, and I had to prick my finger every single day and document everything that I ate. And I
Mm-hmm.
was normal and fine.
Yep.
But she kept saying, but you're so, heavy and you're
You're so
gaining so much
big.
weight. I was 105 when I gave birth. I was over 200 pounds
Right.
of fluid, just a
Mm-hmm.
fluid. So she knew that I think that's the thing with doctors is that they're taking that pregnancy, you're supposed to gain weight when that's not
Mm-hmm.
true. And if you are gaining, looking like you're not fat, you're swollen from the
Right.
fluid.
Right.
And that
And
fluid is suffocating the heart.
and I sometimes wonder if it's because I didn't have any previous history with her because we had just moved here. So
Where's here?
Huntsville, Alabama. I apologize.
Alabama. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Huntsville, Alabama. We'd been here for maybe a year, so I'd never seen her before. And so she didn't really have anything to compare to because when I saw her, I was already, a couple weeks pregnant. And and it was all over. And I guess I don't remember them ever specifically looking for any kind of edema or fluid retention or anything. It was just assumed it was all over pregnancy weight gain.
Correct. And so that's why, not having symptoms until the very end is too late for diagnosis at that point. That's why the simple blood test is supposed to be standard and mandatory within the first appointment that a woman has during her pregnancy and following after.
It's silly not to.
When did you learn about the NT-proBNP test?
At my 6-month follow-up. It was in my kind of paperwork, and I always look through my paperwork just to make sure everything's in there so I don't have to write anything down or forget it. And I was looking at like the blood work panels, kind of asking what everything was. And I was kind of, familiar with it from previous hospital stay and visits. And I asked about that. And then she explained it to me. And she was like, you've never heard of this, or nobody's ever spoken to you about that? And nothing. And I was like, no, I have no idea what this is. And I feel like she was trying to hide it, but I think she was a little shocked, the cardiologist in Birmingham. And so kind of ever since then, it's something that I keep an eye on. and kind of look for in my paperwork and ask about if they don't mention it to me at my appointments.
And I'm actually curious why it's such a hush conversation, even with my experience. And one of the reasons why I am starting this docuseries and having women come forward and talk is because when it started about 5 years ago, I was on the hunt of putting the pieces in the puzzle together and realizing that in the birthing community, whether it's a birth keeper, doula, midwife, there was a baby bump expo in in New Jersey, Cherry Hill, where I was from.
Mm.
And everybody just didn't have awareness. No one ever heard of peripartum cardiomyopathy. And once they were
like an entire expo,
and there's over 2,000 offices and medical communities, and specifically one that I really wanted to, educate because it's my hometown. And, I care about, the families and the generations. I'm from a small town. I want there to be awareness. And I think the issue that I came across and what really got me is that the unwillingness to not want to have informative information that could be life-saving for a woman. And for you, to have your experience and it to be, not dismissed. What were the complications that happened to you for the late diagnosis?
Like leading up to the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So this was my second baby. I had a 4-year-old at the time and then the newborn, and I was nursing him. And my 4-year-old's birthday is about a month after my newborns. So we had everybody, family down for 4-year-old's birthday, meeting new baby. And that was really the first time that I kind of remember experiencing symptoms more than just like new tiredness. I was breathless. Just like at the end of the day, I was more tired than I ever remember being. Mm-hmm. And we just kind of chalked it up. I was nursing, chalked it up to that, being, a new mom of 2 babies, getting used to that, all the craziness of family at the house for a whole weekend, all of that. And then just symptoms kept progressively getting worse. And so we thought, well, maybe flu, maybe COVID, maybe I need to eat better. Maybe my body's not responding to nursing well, because he was nursing all the time. And then it kind of one day I was walking upstairs to go to bed and I had to stop in the middle of the stairwell to sit down and catch my breath. And that's when I made an appointment with my OB. Mm-hmm. I was like, listen, it's more than just normal tiredness. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then before my appointment with her is when I ended up going to the ER. I was changing my son's diaper on the recliner. My husband brought him to me, brought him everything to change his diaper. Was finished, and I went to go hand, he wasn't even 2 months old at the time, went to go hand him back to my husband, and I physically could not do it. Like, I didn't have the energy. Yeah. My body just, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and your body was failing.
Mm-hmm, that night we went to the ER.
Yeah, that physical feeling of the body failing, I remember that.
It's scary.
It's very scary.
I was like, I can't. He's like, what do you mean you can't? I was like, my body just won't. I cannot do it.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
And that's heart failure. I mean, it was like, it's because that fluid suffocates your heart, and it either weakens or enlarges the heart. And mm-hmm. when it suffocates, it's suffocating.
That's what it feels like too.
Yeah. And people think that peripartum cardiomyopathy is a heart problem, but it's really not. It's a fluid problem, mm-hmm. where the fluid in the blood causes the heart to fail. The heart is perfect, which is why it's called a pregnancy-induced heart failure. So mm-hmm. the fact mm-hmm. that it's induced that it just indicates that, you know, any healthy woman, young woman can get this, and that, you know, the fact that it's so common, 1 out of 4 women, and it's just rare for anybody to know this, which is why we're talking about this today, because these conversations are so important for every individual, not just for the medical community, because like I always say, we're not obligated to educate and train the medical community,
That's
but
their job.
we can
For us.
advocate our sisterhood, our women, to advocate for themselves and
Yes.
to demand the NT-Pro BNP test.
Mhm.
And this would have saved you from feeling your life at a threat.
Mhm. I mean, I ended up in a 2-week hospital stay, and just in that
Yeah.
short amount of time, it affected so many people, not just me and like my husband and children. It was, you know, my husband, my father-in-law, even as far as like my husband's company he works for, because he had to work from home. And there was a day where he had to go in the office to pick up some things and, you know, take our sons with him. And thank God they were amazing about it. But it's, you know, and it's my parents, my sister, you know, my sister, it's so much more.
Yes, it does. It affects the whole family. And
Mhm.
it's such a shame, because when I say this information literally saves mothers, babies, and families, it's because it's not affecting just the woman. You know, the man, you know, the partner has to watch their loved one that just gave life possibly not live. And it's a sad disease where there has to be a support group of
Mhm.
some sort, a
Absolutely.
family, and that it takes a village to raise a family. And then here you have this awful disease on top of it, and you're supposed to go back to your normal life. And you
No.
know,
Yeah.
it's challenging, and it's like we can, you know, put a smile on our face and try being positive, but moving forward, when you've gone through something like this,
Mhm.
it does affect the entire family. It's a scare
Yeah.
that sadly can be prevented.
And I remember just trying to put on a brave face for everybody, like, oh, it's fine. It's not that serious. It's fine. I'm okay. In my head, I'm like, I could have died.
Yep.
And like that was crazy to me. That took me a long time to get over that.
I don't think I'm still over it. I had my times of death called. I was pronounced dead over 30 minutes each cardiac arrest. And then
Oh
I was in
my
a
goodness.
hyperthermia coma. They froze me like a popsicle. So when I woke up and was diagnosed, I was like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how your doctors reacted to it, but my doctors, when I went back to them after the fact and said, you know, I had my times of death called, I had cardiac arrest, I was at the hospital 7 days ago, it didn't matter. They automatically, they want to blame somebody, but they didn't have
Mhm.
anybody to blame. So they were blaming me for the disease. And back then, I didn't have the education and knowledge and the articulation of to be able to say, when they said to me, oh, you just got the bad luck of the draw
Right.
of getting PPCM, not knowing that PPCM is common and that it's just rare for any awareness and that there's a prevention. I didn't have the knowledge to say, okay, well, I did get the bad luck of the draw of having an entire medical hospital, not only the East and West Tower, not only the ER, had zero awareness of peripartum cardiomyopathy and the BNP test. So, and they, again, unwilling to be informed
Mhm.
and learn from my near death experience. And they didn't learn because on November 21st, 2021 recently at Cedars-Sinai, where I gave birth, a woman died recently. And her name was Leah. And it's on, I actually put it in the press because that girl her life could have been saved.
Absolutely.
It was almost as if she had the same doctors, same East and West Tower. I went to them. I tried for an entire year and talking to the high risk management, and I was blown off, and I was made feeling like peripartum cardiomyopathy was my fault. And so
like
for
you, being
you,
dramatic, right?
yes, yeah, I was even called one time too dramatic, when I feel like this is a very traumatic experience. And this was at a woman's group, and she took what I educated in Congress, and one of the women said, "Oh, she's just being dramatic." And I thought, how could somebody say that through a postpartum depression bill that's going to be passed, of saying that having death and surviving maternal mortality after just giving birth, how could that be not traumatic or dramatic? So I was like, that's weird. So this is what I feel like with you. There's got to be some sort of justice for yourself, for your family, a voice. And this is why I feel like women are still suffering, because they're not being listened to. And if they're not being listened to, then they need the BNP test. So one or the other has to give. They either got to listen to the women or diagnose them and make the test mandatory.
So speaking of like listening to women, when I was discharged from the hospital, I was sent home with a life vest, the external defibrillator that I had to wear. And it came with a battery pack that I wore like a crossbody purse, and it kind of stuck out to the bottom of my shirt. And I kind of like avoided it or tried to hide it. And then the more that I kind of educated myself and read up on it, realized not enough people know about this. So then every once in a while, I would kind of pay attention. People would be like curious, or somebody would ask me about it. And then it finally clicked, and I used every single opportunity to talk about it and tell them what happened to me. And I did feel a little silly at first, like I'm oversharing, or, like kind of, what is it, fear mongering, or like trying to scare people. But I was like, no, like I'm going to tell everybody I can, any and everybody that will listen, because maybe I told somebody's brother about it, and then his sister was experiencing something. He's like, you know what? I talked to this woman in Target one time, yada, yada. Maybe you should ask your doctor about this. And if that saves her, then it was all worth it.
Absolutely. And I always thought, like, anybody who passes my path or in my orbit will know.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
You think maybe that's the person that I was meant to tell, that would tell somebody else, and then it might save somebody. And whenever we think people are not listening, they are. And I struggled with that for years. Like I kept saying, I keep spreading the awareness every day, but I don't think people are listening. And and that wasn't true, because then I got messages to confirm, I just would like to thank you, because this, my brother's sister's friend or whatnot, we couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And I went back to your Facebook page, looked up your website, and then knew the test to tell the doctors. And then we determined that she was in fact peripartum cardiomyopathy, and you saved her and her baby's life. And that's when I realized, okay, this was like 3 years ago. And I said, okay, so people are listening.
Yes. Victory.
Yeah. And I think until it happens, they're like, wait a minute, I remember, it's like almost like,
what was that woman
in one year and out the other?
I remember seeing.
Yeah. Yes. And then it connects. And that's why it's like, a warrior really fights to what they believe in. And I believe in a woman's voice in
Yes.
this disease, and on
Absolutely.
behalf of the families and, you know, the suffering that goes with it and the mental health and, you know, getting over something so traumatic, you know, the
Mhm.
fear. And it's something that will always have, even if time goes on.
Mhm.
It's like you can think about that moment even years ago and still pull up those same feelings
Mhm. It's like
because it was
that
real.
little push you need to keep doing the work, to keep spreading, you know, the information.
Yes. And what would you like to tell viewers that are watching this that will save lives? Because I don't think I know. It's a matter of, you know, somebody really just taking the time and being willing to listen to what, you know, should happen, that should be already mandatory.
Oh, what would I tell them? About,
Your experience in that maybe could help them.
if you feel like something isn't right, even if it's just the littlest thing, don't try and write it off to something else. You are worth bugging any and everybody to to help figure it out. Even if it's just routine tests to ease your mind, to give you peace of mind, bug them. Get on the internet and say, you know what, I was on WebMD and I read about this. Let's look into that. Like, you and your family are worth it.
Self-advocacy.
Yes, absolutely. Don't be, I mean, I know I a little bit, I was like, I don't want them to think I'm being dramatic. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want them to think I'm crazy. I can't tell them like, oh, I was on WebMD and read this. Like, no, like you can't think like that when it comes to your life.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
you are
And
worth
that
it.
100%. And no matter what would come, you know, out to the doctor or whatever, and if it's, you know, blunt, then that's the way it came out, because
Mhm.
most women who are survivors are angry
Yes.
with their birthing professional
You're confused.
and confused,
I get so confused.
because women been giving birth since the beginning of time, and this should be an ancient conversation, but we're having it for the first time,
Yep.
and it's 2022.
And all just a simple blood test. That's it.
A simple blood test to
That is
diagnose.
that they
Without
can
diagnosis, there's no treatment.
make a part of the routine blood panel. There's nothing special about it. They don't have to do anything separate or crazy or specific.
Mm-hmm.
It can already be run.
And the issue that I'm finding with birth keepers, I think they call themselves now doulas and midwives, is that they're more holistic. So just because you're holistic, what does that mean about not checking a simple blood test?
Right.
I mean, it's,
They're like, where's that line? Like,
yeah. I mean, if it can save the prevention for maternal mortality, and they have such a passion about delivery and birth and labor and delivery, why wouldn't they want to know?
mm-hmm.
And I posted something on Facebook recently with I think she's a doula or midwife, whatever, birth keeper, and she calls herself a pregnancy specialist, and she was extremely swollen in her ankles. And it'd be one thing, I wouldn't have said anything, but I saw the fluid literally traveling up to her knees. And so I mentioned about the NT-Pro BNP test and how, you know, it's not to scare, it's just to be aware of your number, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because there's preventions. And here she's a birthing specialist with a pregnancy induced complication, and basically said she was not interested in being informed, and that it was scary to her about the information about the simple blood test. And she told me, in like, literally to F off. And that I felt was like exactly what most birthing professionals do. They, whether they're pregnant or not, or they're working, they are not interested in being informed. And then once they are, if they don't do anything with that information, it's just careless at that point. And
Absolutely.
and it's life threat to the baby. There's a lot of babies that don't make it when it could have been prevented. And, you know, this is why, you know, I think that this platform of starting this wave of this pregnancy movement is life-saving information.
So important. And so going with like how common it is, I was admitted to one hospital in Alabama. They transferred me to the local women's and children's hospital. And that's where I was like officially diagnosed. And from what they told me, I was made to believe this was very, very, very rare.
Right.
And then they kind of like use that as a way to explain why my ejection fraction was 15%.
I was going to say, what was your EF was 15? Do you 15%. Know your do you know your BNP number?
I don't. It's so I actually just got out of the hospital with pneumonia. And my cardiologist made them run my BNP number. Thank goodness for her. But it's in my paperwork now, but they were like, oh my goodness, this is so uncommon. And there were nurses in the ICU in the Women's and Children's Hospital that had never heard of the words peripartum cardiomyopathy before.
Yeah.
And then they kind of looked at me funny. And then I was newly diagnosed. I was like, well, I think that's what they said. I'm pretty sure that's what they told me. And then I'm second guessing myself.
Right.
And I'm like, how, now looking back on it now, I'm like, how do you never even heard of those words before?
Well, yeah. And that's why in the United States of America, it's so common, which is why the docuseries is called, you know, the US's of the epidemic of the painful truth of maternal mortality. And it is because I literally have documented everything in over 2,000 medical professionals in the birthing community, and not one nurse, not one has ever heard of PPCM peripartum cardiomyopathy. And this is like appalling, unacceptable, because there's obviously signs, you know, it's throughout the years. We're in 2022.
Yeah.
There are obviously signs of cardiology and gynecology where they should have been collaborated, which is why when I woke up from death, I didn't just have cardiac arrest. My cardiologist, she reminds me, you had cardiac death. And with my experience in the study that I brought to UCLA with this at Women's Cardiology Center with gynecology, because I said to my cardiologist, women depend on our doctors to know. And when you're being checked from the belly button down, that's gynecology. And the belly button up is cardio. You know, so it's like it's a pregnancy induced heart failure. And it's not even a heart problem. It's a fluid problem that crushes the heart. So this is a very gray area where there needs to be collaboration for cardiology to educate gynecology.
Yes, for them to work together.
And them to work together and then educate the nurses.
Yes.
Because we're the ones that see the nurses. Half the time we don't see the doctors.
Right.
So the nurses need to be educated and trained as well. And hoping that women won't have to educate and train the medical community and for this to get out there and be mandatory already. So that's what our strives and goals are.
Absolutely. So going along with that, my son's pediatrician was actually the only medical professional that was putting 2 and 2 together.
Which one? It was
my son's pediatrician, Dr. Denny.
Dr. Denny in Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama. Yep. And
Is this the PPCM baby's pediatrician?
yes, ma'am. And my 4-year-old, but it was with my
Second
PPCM
one.
baby's visits.
Mm-hmm.
We were nursing. Everything was going perfectly. He was transferring efficiently. I even went and rented a baby scale so I could do weighted feeds all day, every day. I was producing enough. He was, enough wet and dirty diapers. Everything was going perfectly, yet he was not gaining weight. We were going for weight checks literally every other day. And finally, he looked at me and he said, You didn't have a C-section or anything? And I said, No. He said, Did you have any sort of other infection, maybe some stitches anywhere, any infection when you're in the hospital, anything? I said, No, like it was in and out. It was textbook. And he kind of got like a puzzled look on his face. He said, and then he kind of urged me to go, speak with my primary care physician or my OB to kind of get some blood work done, kind of head to toe. Because he said, because everything else is perfect. There's no reason this baby should not be gaining weight.
So him observing your baby gave him the intuition and common sense to know that maybe there was something wrong with you.
He did, yes.
Smart man.
So he did
very smart man.
We did ultrasounds on baby's belly for I forget what it is, but it's when a valve kind of backfires or doesn't work or something. So they don't get he did that. He did blood work on baby. He did everything he could for baby. And then when he'd exhausted all that, he looked at me and he was like, You're the only other factor.
Right.
You're
yeah. Interesting. So that, and it goes to show when, symptoms are ignored and not treated because there's no diagnosis, that it really does affect the baby and that it's not just the mom
and then it affecting baby in turn affected me.
Right.
Which of the, hormones and then heart that I didn't know. And it's just a crazy time on top of everything else.
Definitely not joyful when it should have been.
I know, but it is now.
It is. Yeah. Well, exactly. Blessings to surviving maternal mortality and
for all the women we lost, which is even more reason to get out there and make people listen.
Exactly. And that's why that's my number one reason is that I feel that all souls have a voice. Even the babies that no longer, didn't have the chance to have a voice, the mothers that, are raging on the other side because they were so healthy prior to pregnancy because of the induced complications that were ignored and, left to die. It's almost as if enough deaths, enough suffering, enough, family catastrophes when there is prevention.
Yes.
And that's what's so, I think, so sad about this disease is that it's been going on for so long and there's a real practical solution to a very serious problem and addressing it and having the awareness is literally the key to this diagnosis and this disease.
And it's there, but it's nobody wants to act on it.
Yes.
It's OB thinks it's cardio's job. Cardio thinks it's OB's job.
It's not. It's a pregnancy-induced heart failure. So really, it's with pregnancy should always have cardiology on board. There always should be. There's a human growing inside of another human. Of course, there's going to do something to the heart. It's just the way it's because we have blood and fluid. And really, this BNP test really works for dogs. It works on boys. It works on men. I have my son's BNP on the refrigerator. And it also determines the elevated vessels in cancer, in dementia, and you don't die from cancer and dementia, you die from the heart failure. So
Right.
there are preventions, and it's really sad because
Just
if
from a
we knew
simple
our,
blood test.
so I say as early as like the baby is born,
Mhm.
know their BNP test number because you might prevent cancer.
I
Maybe there'll
have
be
my boys have checkups coming soon. I'm adding that to the list.
absolutely. And I told Liam, he's 5, but he knows. And if you start them early, it's not, it's different than a flu shot or like in type of injection of like, you're not injecting anything. You're checking the blood
Mm-hmm.
of the function of how your baby is functioning and how
Yep.
you are functioning and your husband is functioning and your dog is functioning. Found out you can't do it on a cat, but believe you me, man, I couldn't believe that trying to have an educated intellectual conversation in gynecology with really most birthing professionals has been very challenging. But when I went to my veterinarian, because I got a golden retriever puppy, and I had a very interesting conversation about the BNP test. And he walked out of the office, comes back, and actually sits down with me. And they
Mhm.
were all really surprised. And he said, after he said, I did my research as I was still at the visit, and he said, you're absolutely right. And I wish I had this information for the meeting last night, but we're going to have another Zoom meeting and we're going to integrate this because we do have dogs that, suffer from fluid diseases
Yeah.
like cancer, heart failure, and it does work on a dog, but it does not work on a cat. You can get a cat an EKG, but the simple blood test does work on a dog. So it was a great conversation. I felt like so successful walking out of that vet office. I'm like, why can't gynecologists be like that?
Right? That was so easy, so productive. Why can't?
Yeah. And I was like, well, at least I saved dogs,
Right?
I mean, who doesn't I love dogs more than people, but like, it's like, it's funny because, it's like, I couldn't believe I was having this great
With the
educational he was willing.
Yes.
And then he looked it up and then he
Right.
he made calls and then I sat out there. I sat out in the waiting room for quite some time and I was like, what is this doctor doing? But he was doing his due diligence before I left.
That's
and
amazing.
to tell me that I educated him and that he's been, he's in Calabasas. He's a fantastic vet, but he had no awareness and now he does.
Yeah.
So,
and then he'll spread it to other vets. If we could just get one person from like the human medical community.
Right. Well, exactly. And that's why my doctor, Dr. Carol Watson over at UCLA and Women's Cardiology Center, she has taken this far with gynecology and they do Zoom calls together and because of the collaboration and my just showing up and following up with my doctor and being so passionate about all of this with women that my cardiologist is on the same page with me and said that because of this, millions of dollars went to the Women's Center, that she got donations.
That's amazing.
And that it's not just successful in the studies and their collaboration, but they're going to take this where it needs to go for cardiology and gynecology to come together. And that's
amazing.
Yeah, it took 5 years. But what my cardiologist always says is women need to talk. And I know it's, we're not, we're just the average people just trying to make a difference. But I believe that we're the ones to make the difference. We are the individuals to say enough women like us have suffered and had a scare and whose life is shortened.
Because, and I wonder if some of the hesitation in the medical community is because, just for lack of a better term, it's just women. It's not women and men and children. It's just women having this problem. And like I said, I was made to feel like I was being a little dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was called dramatic.
Yeah. Like
from Mo Mamas or Mama's Voice, that group.
Or from other women experiencing similar things.
No, this was the head of a woman's group called Mama's Voice. And it was like amazing. She called me dramatic. And after I spoke in Congress, and to be frank, it was like whether or not I was dramatic, it was the words that were coming out. Mm-hmm. And the words that were coming out was just my reality. You know, it was just the fact of what happened. Right. So it's not like I was being dramatic, but the disease is dramatic.
It's a dramatic situation. And sometimes I wonder if some medical professionals are still kind of have that stereotype, that women stereotype stuck in their mind of it's just dramatic. It's fine.
Or it's just anxiety.
She just needs to rest. Yeah, it's anxiety. Right. She'll be fine. It's the hormones. It's fine.
And that's why the blood test is so important, because it's the only diagnosis of indication that she's not fine. And that
she's not dramatic. She's not crazy.
Right. She's dying, in fact.
Yeah, literally.
And that's where it's so frustrating, because even after the fact and going back to them, it's like there's no resolution. And I hear this from so many, like, we don't know if that doctor in a few years is going to, you know, die, you know, have a patient that dies. Like my experience at Cedars-Sinai, East and West Tower, they have a protocol where you get to rotate doctors. And recently, now the high risk management department blew me off for over a year. They even made me feel like it was my fault. They said that I got the bad luck of the draw. They were unwilling. And because they were unwilling to learn from my death experience and coming back from like death, literally, this poor girl on November 21st, 2022, she did die. Her name was Leah. Her father is an actor in Hollywood. And it was November 21st, 2021. And it's a shame, because it was at Cedars-Sinai. And if they just learned from me and was willing, I didn't sue. I had no intention. I even told them, I just want you to be educated and learn that there's a prevention, and that I was diagnosed waking up from my times of death, and that this could have been prevented as early as 10 weeks pregnant. That means that women, and I think the statistics is every 3 minutes, a young woman that was once healthy is suffering and possibly dying. And the statistics in the United States of America is every year, 2,000 new cases. So we know of, but how can we do a statistic if there's no mandatory test?
Right. So, and all the women who are chalking it up to any and everything else and just living with it for however long or dying from it. And we'll never know. And that's scary.
Yeah, we haven't known. Yeah. And we still don't know. And it's 2022. So
speaking of, like, you know, we've been giving birth for forever. There is a show, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, called The Midwife on PBS.
Yes, I am familiar.
And last year, when I was in the hospital, their Christmas special, there was a woman on there who was diagnosed with peripartum cardiomyopathy. And I just thought that was a crazy coincidence. But then looking back on it now, it was like, I feel like that's a little bit of a start of kind
It's
of
been
getting the word out
mentioned.
there.
Yeah, no, it's been mentioned a few times. I've even actually, there was a show and I put it on like my Instagram. I took a clip of it, but they, it has been mentioned throughout the years,
Mm-hmm.
actually, even on older films, which I've noticed.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that's why I question, why has this been such a
Right.
wow, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of PPCM. I've never, like, why hasn't it connected with the medical community to
Mm-hmm.
want to do something, because it has been known.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the blood test is not unheard, like if you were to request it, it's there.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's unheard of. And the fact that it's so common, it's just rare for any awareness.
Mm-hmm.
We have to ask ourselves why. I mean,
Yeah.
is this a conspiracy?
Yeah. It's like what do they all know that they don't want us to? And also the risks of, once you are diagnosed, the risks that come with having another child. I
Yes.
was actually encouraged to have my tubes tied
Mm-hmm.
to prevent another pregnancy. And I was like, whoa, like this is my third day in the hospital. Let's slow your roll. But if somebody's not diagnosed and they survive, recover or not, and then go on to have another child, like that's another opportunity for them to possibly not make it. Like I don't understand why doctors aren't doing more.
Yeah, I was robbed of that. I can never have another child. I mean, come on, I had my death. My son is my everything. And
Mhm.
I would be, if he was to lose me, it's not worth it.
Ooh,
I've always wanted to have, maybe like two or three, but in this day and age, I don't know. I mean, I try to like make, it right in my head that, oh, it's,
yeah. You tell yourself things to make it
tell
better.
me things that, oh, kids are so expensive. I'm so glad I only have one, and say, but like
Right.
in my heart of heart, like whether or not I wanted to have more or not, the
You
fact
don't
was
get the
that it was
choice.
taken from me. I think is
Absolutely.
it kind of like made me feel like, well, I mean, I know that I'm, a woman that is enough.
Hmm.
But to take something like that away, it was like, at that point, it's only natural for a woman to feel like I'm no longer, enough because
Hmm.
I can't produce,
It's I agree. I kind of sometimes with some bitterness, people ask, "Oh, are you done? Are you going to have another?" I'm kind of like, "Well, doctor says I'm done, so I'm done."
Yeah,
And I just try to play it off, but
I do. Yeah,
it's tough.
it is. And
Like
for
in my
some reason, I'm always surrounded by women that are holding, like, literally even nursing in front of me or
no.
pregnant in front of me. And it's like, I couldn't breastfeed. I was in a freaking coma. So,
Hmm.
you know,
I
um,
still get bitter about that too. I'm like, I mean, I got to for a month, kind of. And then it's like because of all my medications, it wasn't safe. And I need to be here. Like me being here is more important than nursing him. So sometimes I get a little bitter about that too.
yes.
But I just hope with time it'll kind of fade or I'll be able to see it in a different light and just be
I
happy, I'm here.
Yeah, I think it's all in how, our perception is in coping.
Mhm.
It's like we can't be hard on ourselves because we didn't do anything wrong. It
Right.
was our doctors that
Yes.
had absolutely zero awareness, and they should take some responsibility, even though
Mhm.
they would like to blame us as survivors and they would like to blame the cardiologist or whatnot. But the reality is that the lack of training and education to
Mhm.
start is going to change,
It
and
has, yeah.
we're going to make we're going to make change by by having these discussions. And so it's almost as if, like, when a doctor and a midwife or a doula, and they see these conversations and they hear these conversations. It's almost like, okay, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And we can only hope that they apply the information. But if not, I think our message to the viewers that are watching this is that self-advocacy, when you feel like something's wrong in your body, is because there's something wrong. And if your doctors are saying that you're fine, then the only way for you to know is to really check, and that's through a simple blood test.
And also I've started telling women, don't be afraid to change providers. Go find a new provider. Ask for a referral. That is your right.
Yes.
Like there's nothing,
but even still, I went to 22 providers, and they all had lack of awareness. So, it's kind of say that, and that's why, and when I started to do my due diligence, because I'm, like I said, I work in the industry in Hollywood. I'm very good at what I do, and I really get to the nitty gritty of things. And I was trying every approach. I was trying all different methods, and nothing was connecting. Nothing was making right. And it still doesn't. And it's because there is no, there's no real connection with this. And the only connection that we will have, that we have, are the survivors that speak up. And, the definition of crazy, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, women have been dying for how long? And when there's a real practical solution to a very serious problem and it's not getting solved, this is like, you got to wonder, like,
right. Let's just sit back and let it happen to all the women. Like,
no.
And I love that women and you, for doing this, are starting to speak out and get the word out, because it's not like a one size fits all problem. From being in the group, I've read so many different scenarios and situations and recovery stories and diagnosis stories. And it's just like,
it really is endless.
It really,
and the recovery with this is endless. And, and I care so much about people that really could be prevented, because one out of 4 women, that's pretty common. And, I know that this woman was telling me off, this birth keeper, pregnancy specialist that was having a pregnancy complication and stuff. And I might have, just said, hey, listen, I'm trying to help you. It's not to hurt, it's to help. It's just awareness. And the feedback has to change. And I've noticed behind the scenes of PPCM Fund is I can see the volume of interest. And the fact is that peripartum cardiomyopathy is a young, healthy woman pregnancy disease. And young women never think of mortality, let alone maternal mortality can happen to them.
Yep. Especially all the tests that OBs already do during pregnancy. You would think that if those are all okay, then I'm fine.
Yeah, there's a whole blood panels that we have. And they'll all come out normal.
Yeah.
Because it's not the right compatible blood test.
Just missing one
test. And if it's the only test, then why is it not mandatory? And why, once they're educated with it, why are they just like brushing it under the rug? Is there something that, as women, and it's global, it's not just the United States,
right? But
specifically in the United States of America, I have to say we are one of the richest countries. We have the highest health care. We have the best providers, and we have one of the highest maternal mortality, death rates country globally.
And it's like, why? There's no reason.
Lack of education, lack of awareness, and the things are not approved.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have things in America that are approved in other countries. Like it's called a toxic fluid blood test mixed with the placental growth factor, and it's called the SFLT1, and the 1 stands for genetic, and the SFLT stands for cardiotoxic, and the PIGF stands for placental growth factor. Together, that can determine toxic fluid and how the placental growth. But I've called so many reps, I called the main companies for the kit and the instruments, but FDA has not approved them in the United States of America. But they're hopeful that it will be approved within a year and a half. And I said, do you know that every 3 minutes a young healthy girl gets PPCM? So that means until then, these girls need to suffer and die and have to rely on cardiology for the BNP test. And they said, we hear you. We think it's such a shame. It's available in Canada. It's available in Australia. It's available, but it's not available in the United States yet.
Okay, well, good for those countries. I don't live in those countries.
Right. Well, we live in a very, very, stable country where this should not be one of the highest death rate countries in the world.
Yeah.
And I look at, even like Haiti, with, Dr. Fett, he's so passionate about Haiti, and I've been doing a lot of research there, and, it's amazing what awareness really does, because their death rate has gotten way under control for maternal mortality just for having the awareness of the BNP test and the SFLT1 and the PGIF. They have the test, the kits, and the awareness. So Haiti has a less now, I think, believed death rate than the United States of America, if I'm not mistaken, because they do have awareness.
So with all the advocacy work that you do you find that frustrating? Like, why are their medical professionals listening and taking action and helping these women, but ours aren't?
Yes, it is frustrating, because it's not just you're dealing with the medical community, you're dealing with underlying approvals to make
the whole line of,
well, they're called kits and instruments available in hospitals in the United States. Like if a woman goes to the ER hospital and she's sent home fine, and then she has a cardiac arrest and dies after giving birth, it's because they don't have the proper instrument and kits, is what they call them, for the blood panels. And so they don't, unless a doctor has common sense and actually cares and gives their time and takes a moment and knows about the BNP, knows about peripartum cardiomyopathy, then that person just got very lucky. And that's what's scary. There shouldn't be luck with having the prevention awareness. When you walk into an ER, there should either be the knowledge, oh, she just gave birth, she's swelling up, she's this. Give her the BNP test, give her an ultrasound, check her EF percent, check the size of her heart. Is it enlarged? Is it weakened? Do the proper screening labs and tests once a woman goes to an ER after giving birth. It should be automatic. Okay, this is what we do.
In place already.
Yes. And again, it all comes down to the proper training and education. And if we can advocate an individual woman and our sisterhood to advocate for themselves and to demand when they get to the hospital then their life can be possibly saved and their baby. And maybe this video will make a difference, our conversation that we are having, where I don't think I know it will save lives, because if I was pregnant and watching something like this, I would want to know. I wouldn't take information, educational information, as fearful. I would take it as, oh,
that's knowledge that I want for myself.
Absolutely. And that's the way, that's the right perception. And a lot of women are like, why don't you try this approach or that approach? Or you need to change your approach or this approach. And it's been 5 years. I've used every approach under the sun. It's not about the approach. It's about the other person willing to take and perceive this information as not something fearful, but as something educational and life-saving. And that needs to, it's got to have a certain type of mind switch. And as I was saying earlier, the demographics of who supports this cause and who has awareness, it says it right there, women over the age of 50 and men. That's unacceptable. Yeah. So the women that need to know don't care to know. They don't want to be informed.
Crazy. I don't understand. Don't understand.
Well, you're young. You don't want to.
It can't happen to me.
It can't happen to me. I was a dancer. I was like healthy, running around Runyon Canyon, working top TV shows as if I'm like, I would go from my dance class to my Equinox to running Runyon to going to set, getting up at 4 a.m, filming all day, and having an active life.
Yep.
To getting pregnant and having my times of death called to now being fine again. Okay. There's something there. If this happens to me, then it can happen to any girl.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you have a daughter, right?
I have 2 sons.
You have 2 sons. Now, I don't know if the study. I'm curious. He's 5 now. I'm supposed to get his heart checked at age 5.
Well, so I have a 5-year-old as well. I mean, he wasn't my PPCM baby, but so because he was your PPCM baby, is that why you have to get his?
Yeah, they recommend an EKG at 5 years old to compare through the life, because he was a PPCM baby, and it was like in the neurological department that mentioned it, actually, not even cardiology.
Another thing, I had no idea about that. Like, nobody ever said anything to me about about my condition affecting my son at all. I had no idea.
Absolutely. So that's why there has to be follow-ups of the BNP and the EKG, at least maybe not once a year for a kid, but at 5, maybe again at 7.
Yeah.
Just to kind of if he's
a big growth
depending.
Phases.
Yeah, just to know what his ticker's doing.
Right. Huh.
And I think
I'm writing this down because I had no idea.
I think with boys, and when boys are growing inside of the mom, it's not girls, it's just boys. We share the same DNA brain cells. So there could be some sort of, it's really a cool theory where almost like you can have a psychic connection because you guys share the same, because a son growing inside of a mother's womb share the same brain cells. It's somehow they get our brain cells and we get theirs, and we're connected. And so there's something with that I feel like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, it's like literally like a physical connection.
Exactly. Whereas a girl inside of you, which is very interesting, that I think is kind of cool, is that, and it doesn't happen with a male, only with a woman, that when you carry your little girl, and when the girl fetus is, growing inside of you, you're also carrying your grandchild because she's a girl.
I read
And
something
she's-
about that recently because of the eggs are already inside them, like their eggs.
Which is why sometimes there's always a connection with the grandma
Mhm.
when there's a grandma and because the grandma has carried not only her daughter but her granddaughter,
Mhm. I did read.
and then her great, so it's like,
There's
and
that
with the
physical connection.
and with the son and the
Mhm.
mom, it's a brain thing. It's a DNA cell brain,
Huh.
and it's very cool. But with that, there's there could be fluid, or
I was gonna say,
I think about that.
There's got to be more. If something is as complex as brain cells can do that, there's got to be other, physical things
I would
like
love
that
to.
as well.
I think there's a new study. There's like 30 studies right now at the IPAC lab.
Mhm.
They have 50 centers, and they're on their second phase of a study called Rebirth. And I believe that's actually one of the studies that they are doing. So I'm very
Wow.
curious. I'll upload it when I get the study information. I'll upload it onto the PPCM website
Yeah.
and make you aware of that, because we have so many new studies that are coming out,
Mhm.
and I believe that this was one of them, because I thought that was very interesting, because we think about us maternal mortality and surviving, but we don't know what the effects are for the children and for the
Right.
babies.
That's kind of what you just told me kind of led me to thinking like,
Mhm.
that's wow.
Yeah, and these are why we have these conversations, because we help each other brainstorm.
Mhm.
We only know what we know. We don't know what we don't know.
Mhm.
And I've been learning so much from these interviews on what happens to
Yeah.
babies.
Wow.
And yeah, there just needs to be, again, awareness.
More conversations about it.
More
Not shutting
awareness.
people down who want to talk about it.
Right. Exactly.
One thing, I don't know if this could help anybody or not, but my husband was in the Marine Corps, so we lived a couple states. And back in Arizona, I, long story short, I had a blood clot, wanted to get it checked on again. The doctor was like, no, it's fine. You've been on the blood thinners. It's fine. So I told him I would like him to note it in my file that I asked for the echo, I think, to check on it to make sure it was dissolved. And he denied it, or he said no.
Wow.
And then he kind of left and came back, was like, all right, here's your referral for your echo. Because he did not want to be responsible for writing that in my
writing
file.
anything down.
Mhm.
Right.
So I tell him in that sometimes, I'm like, if because it kind of takes some guts to pull that card with your doctor. So
Sure.
if you feel strongly enough about it, just tell them straight up, be like, listen, I would like to look into this, or I want you to look into that. And if they say no, then tell them, you know what? I would like you to put it in my file that I requested this and you denied me. You said no.
Absolutely.
I would like that in writing.
Yep.
And
I exactly. I had an experience at UCLA with one cardiologist until I finally found mine. I was in a lot of pain, like right here and here. And I mean, you can clearly see like even the vein, and it was like pulsing, and I'm like, this is not right. Something's very painful. And I said, I think I have a blood clot.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, you can't feel blood clots. And I said, have you ever had a blood clot? And he said, no. I said, well, no clot, no say. I'm like,
I love that.
Literally, I said, like, totally. And then it turned out, not only did I have a blood clot, it was from it. They said that I had a rarity, 1 out of like 800 get it. It was a blood clot from here to here, exactly where I thought it was. It was the longest blood clot they said that they've ever seen.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And they kept me on warfarin way longer than I should have been. It was deteriorating my skin, my face. They were saying that it wasn't, which was untrue. again. So it's almost as if like, again, we know our bodies. If something feels wrong, it's because it's wrong. And I spoke up. I mean, I spoke up every time. I'm a Jersey girl. You can take the girl to Jersey, but you can't take the Jersey out of the girl. But even with a voice, I still felt like I was not being heard, blown off, and shut me down in every aspect, post, pre, and even continuing of this disease. It's been a real fight. And so that's why, you know, when we talk and the time that we put into this, it's like we already have this awareness. We're not necessarily talking for us. We're educating others that don't have awareness.
Right.
And that's what I say to others. It's like, I already have this information. You want this information.
I want to share it with everybody.
Exactly.
And then it can be tough because, you know, you say things so many times, and if people, you know, especially professionals, shut you down enough, you kind of start to believe it or second guess yourself.
I've went through that phase.
Yeah.
But instead I literally, my frustrations, my anger, my sadness turned into motivation, determination, and I just was like, I'm not going to, no matter how many times they tell me, and I'm telling you, over 2,000 medical professionals all over the United States of America. And then it just became like, I must be from another planet where I'm an alien, and I am
language.
And I'm speaking a different language, and you know, and then I was like, no, they're the aliens. I'm not.
Like,
and they, you know, I'm not saying something foreign. I'm actually talking, you know, real language here of, you know, not dying.
Like, what rational person doesn't want to just listen?
Right. And that's what's scary, especially birthing professionals that are, you know, I mean, I understand there's a holistic part of birth, and there's a joyful part of birth. And, you know, I see it all the time with, you know, birth keepers and midwives. But the reality is that, you know, it's not always joyful.
And bodies are such complicated things, and you have your own and you're growing one, and it's not so cut and dry all the time. Like, I know.
It's a very complicated, complex, disappointing, appalling, and frustrating conversations with the world when they don't respond. And so, yeah, I'm just really thankful that we can have this conversation. You are here with us today still. And, you know, we're able to, like, you know, connect today. I feel like I know you so well.
and your energy, I just, like, talking to you and about this is like, it's getting me like fired up. Like, your energy is contagious, and I love that. And I love that you were using that to spread awareness and for this cause. And thank you.
You're so very welcome. And I look forward working with you. Like I said, you know, Birmingham, Alabama is definitely close to my heart.
That's my
that
team.
Hospital saved my mom 28 years ago. She was born with a heart murmur, and she had a really good heart team. And we, ironically, we coded on the same day, November 25th. So, yeah. And then after my heart surgery, she got walking pneumonia, and she died recently. I was 4 months after my heart surgery. I was next to her on her deathbed. But it was like, you know, the awareness probably could have saved her from getting walking pneumonia, I feel like, because she was so stressed out with, you know, me dying.
Mhm.
her
Yeah.
her love, her everything. She was my best friend. So, I mean, it's only natural that a mother would worry.
Again, like we
And
were saying, it doesn't affect just the mom. It spreads.
oh, PPCM took my whole family down. My mom died 4 months after my heart surgery from walking pneumonia, and my dad died 18 months later. But my dad died, I believe, he suffered from dementia, but he was in love with my mom since a teenager, and they
Yep.
were married for over 55 years.
His other
And
half, yeah.
so, they had a love story. They had a romantic love story, and it ended tragically with their daughter getting peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM, and then
Mhm.
they died.
Yeah.
And now I believe that energy never dies more than anything, which I have the most comfort, visiting, having one foot on the other side, knowing that,
Yeah.
the veil is thinner than what we believe, and
Mhm.
energy never dies, and our souls are made of energy. And I believe that when your soul spirit and your soul being, when it merges, there's a connection. And I get signs all the time, and I feel supported with this nonprofit,
Love that.
just energetically, spiritually, that this is what I'm meant to do for this movement.
And I
And
feel that from you, just from speaking on here.
yeah,
I feel that, like, you give off that energy, and it's amazing.
well, that's wonderful, because we're right now, I feel like at this point, I don't, nor would I ever want to do this alone.
Mhm.
I need other energies to work with me and to show up. And that's why I thank you today for showing up, telling your story, talking to me about all the different topics related to this disease. And may somebody gain the awareness and really start Googling on their own, and
Mhm.
and and
Speaking up.
and speaking up and
Yeah.
using their woman voice, because
Yes.
every woman has a voice, and
Yes.
every voice
Absolutely.
is important. And the women on the other side that are kicking and screaming mad, and the babies that no longer have a voice, because
That's what we are still here for.
exactly,
It's part of our responsibility, our
I
job.
feel that
Mhm.
1000%. It's our
Absolutely.
responsibility to
Yep.
make sure in the future for our
Mhm.
children's children that
Yes.
it stops at 2022, where there's awareness
Such an
of
advanced world.
the painful truth, but the preventable deaths of maternal mortality,
Mhm.
especially in the
Absolutely.
United States of America.
Yes.
So thank
I
you so
agree.
much. And
Thank you.
I look forward to, seeing your journey as the
Yeah.
years unfold with your little ones.
Thank you. And I look
And
forward to seeing and hearing more from you. And
yes, and working, like I said, come up with something for um, the University of Alabama
in
and
Birmingham, yeah. So
in
Birmingham,
Birmingham.
and I'm in Huntsville, but go to Birmingham every couple months. So if there's ever, ever anything I can do, anything I can help with,
There's a lot.
yeah, I would love to. It's
There's
kind of
a
like
lot, let
I'm
me tell
seeking
you.
help, but I don't really know where to start or what to do. So,
Yeah.
so I just kind of talk for right now because that's what I'm good at. But
Yeah, no, that's what we need to do. That's
Mhm.
exactly what we need to do. And that's the main ingredient
Mhm.
for this resolution.
Mhm.
So,
Start talking.
yep. So
Yep.
thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
lovely night with your beautiful family,
Thank
and
you.
blessings that, you're still here,
You as well. Keep
and
fighting.
yep, we will. We will do it.
Right. Thank you
Have a
so
wonderful night.
much.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the PPCM Fund podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. PPCM's Painful Truth is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Help us spread the awareness by donating at ppcmfund.com or click the link below to become a member through Ko-fi. Also, remember to join us every Monday and Friday for Mom Day Fitness. Have a great day.